Hello. Welcome to the live stream of conclusion of 2023, and we're gonna do some live Q&A today. And so make sure if you have any questions you want to ask, anything about China, about myself, anything like that about 2023, feel free to post them in the chat, and then I'll answer them. Before we do, I will go over some news of the day, I guess, some important stuff in China. So again, as we go along with these, if you do have any other questions for these topics, make sure to also post about them. Now, I need to check something real quick. Perfect. Yeah, so if you have a question, just post them, and then I'll answer them in the order that's received. Okay, so let's go to just some update. So if you guys remember, not this one here. Let's do this first. Okay, let's talk about the economy first with China. All right, so this is from Market Insider, Business Insider. They're talking about this. I think it's pretty important, actually. Foreign investors are selling assets in China. They may not be jumping back. So in China, you have a very strange phenomenon right now, which is there's a lot of effort from the government, from the party, to try to sort of recuperate with the international relationship, right? Especially with American investors. But the problem is, especially remember when Xi Jinping went to that dinner where these billionaires had to pay $40,000 to even get in. Right after they heard what Xi Jinping had to say at that dinner, I think it was Blackstone, the founder of Blackstone or the chairman of Blackstone, they immediately withdrew all their assets from China. So now we're getting sort of headlines like this. Investors are selling assets in China. I think don't have any wish that the economy in China is going to get better in the coming days. It's only going to get worse. Here, it's basically telling us what we already know. Part of this is because of China's economic policy restrictions, as it is said here. And some of the things like supply chain, right? We also have seen a shift moving away from China to countries like Vietnam, to India, to Indonesia, which is both an economic decision, but also very much a political decision, just because you never know what's going to happen in China, right? Given the lockdowns. So these sort of things, I actually appreciate the fact that this kind of headlines are popping up, because it's basically what I've been saying for half a year now, that with the real estate, with foreign investments, all of these things down, there's no reason to go back to China. Cool. Okay, let's go on to, let me see if there's any questions. Hey guys, welcome. So there's a question. Can you comment on Xi Jinping's resurgence of the Feng Chao experience? I don't know if I should be showing that one here. Let me see here. Let me go back to that real quick. I don't think there's anything sensitive that you need to hide, right? Okay, so this question is from LBA, by the way. What Feng Chao experience is, for those of you who don't know, is I can actually here, I'll Google it for you, and then you can see the picture. Feng Chao experience. I think China Media Project did a pretty good one here. Okay. So Feng Chao experience is basically it's started by Mao Zedong, and is this idea that anything happening in China at the time, this was 1950s, 1960s, was due to problems within the base level of society, right? So people to people, and the class struggle, the structure of society was the reason why things are, you don't have food to eat, you don't have money, you don't have a job. Anything that comes from the root of society, right? Inequality, differences of gender, all sorts of things. Points of struggle can be concluded into this Feng Chao experience, or Maple Bridge experience, as translated into English. And the idea here is very simple: is to ignore all aspects of society. Rule of law, especially, is broken in the model, and you just create this new set of rules. It's called people's ruling people, or people ruling people. People's ideologies, which is following Mao at the time, but now they want to follow Xi. This revitalization of the experience is basically to say that we ignore all presidents, we ignore all rule of law. Whatever the people feel at the moment is the reason for their anger or their struggle, right? You've seen this in the West too, with the removal of statues, the whole Black Lives Matter, with Antifa. It doesn't matter what the logical or the law says. It is precisely what happens at that moment. That deserves to rile people up. Then people can destroy things, can put people into public struggle sessions and so on. So I think this is very much a part of the natural process in which, I guess, if you're trying to go back to the Mao era, then this is a natural process. So I think Xi Jinping is definitely trying to push a lot of this, and it's very scary actually. Anybody who's been from a communist country can tell you that when they use the state machine to rile up people, it's much different than using social media, because at that point there's no information available and everything comes from the government, and so you're easily influenced into participating in this. And this is, we're talking bloodshed, struggle sessions, and so on. All right, let's see if there's another question before we go on to another topic. Hey guys, welcome. Question here from Chris Gillis says, I have a question. I'm not Chinese or Asian at all, so I may sound ignorant when I ask this, but I will ask. Are you worried that speaking out this way about ever being in danger, surely there are some risk for you in some way? I always ask myself that when I watch your videos. Great question from Chris. No, I live in the US right now, so personally I'm not in any danger to be killed or anything like that by the CCP. I do have, I think, a sense of security in that this is a country that still, I guess depending on how you view it, but it still has a certain level of protection for its people. There's a set of freedoms that you can enjoy, and I think it's still the beacon of hope for many around the world that the United States remains free and remains a clear contrast, but also the biggest partner in the free world. So in that perspective, I think I feel rather safe when I'm doing things like this. And so, yeah, for me, Chris, I'm not too worried about it. All right, let's, before we go on to more questions, let me go to another topic, okay? Let's go to this one here. So China just appointed a new defense minister after the previous one, Li Shangfu, was purged from the military. Now, this guy here, he is the former Navy chief, so he's the top commander of the Navy, and his name is Dong Jun, and he's been promoted. Now, the reason why Xi Jinping is promoting him is very simple, actually. For one reason, because of loyalty. Now, the Navy, out of all the branches of the Chinese military, the PLA, is perhaps the most loyal, the one that still remains to be loyal, and is the most important branch of the military, considering that if they want to invade Taiwan, the Navy is the most forefront, most important, most useful branch of the military for China. Now, the Navy is also the one where it has not experienced the dramatic purge of the generals, right? Because if you read the other headline today, now this is in Chinese, but I'll translate the post. So the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, they removed the qualifications for, I believe, 9 people. These include, now there's a lot of words here, so I'll just leave it like this and you can read it. But they removed a lot of the former generals, the former commanding officers for the Rocket Force, the Equipment Procurement Commission forces, etc. So the people that are responsible for their nuclear launch, special tactical nuclear launch, precision strikes, for equipment procurement, which is things like acquisition of missiles, tanks, all these sorts of things. There's a huge issue with corruption. It's corruption, but it's really political purging. So these 9 generals have been removed at the same time that this guy here from the Navy has been appointed. So it tells us really importantly, right, if you think about this, to be promoted in Xi Jinping's power regime, you only have to do one thing, which is be loyal to Xi Jinping. But if you were loyal, but then somehow you were involved in a something that would be deemed disloyal, he immediately purges you, right? I think it's pretty natural to think that way. But also it's kind of like, as long as you stay loyal, it doesn't matter if you're really capable for the job, it just have to be loyal. That's the only indicator for promotions inside the CCP right now. And it has a lot of issues, right? But I think this promotion, again, like I said, the Navy is super important, so it makes sense for him to be the defense minister. But being the defense minister doesn't mean he has full power, because the way the CCP is structured, you have the Defense Commission, which is the Central Military Commission on top, and that's the one that actually gets to control the military. The defense minister is just kind of in name only. It's more like a spokesperson. It's almost like it's not the equivalent to, like, say, Lloyd Austin from the Pentagon, right? The Secretary of Defense. It's more like a Pentagon spokesperson in a way. So, pretty important update. Given the fact that Xi Jinping now, we have the Taiwanese election coming up, which is, by the way, so I'm working on a little documentary / special report. It's supposed to air, I wanted to air on the 1st of January, but given the progress that I'm making right now, it might have to be delayed. But I'll try to have it come out before 2024. Well, hopefully I can make it come out 2024, like January 1st or 2nd, but way before the January 13th, which is the Taiwan presidential election. So hopefully we'll have that out. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so with Taiwan too, like if you consider the timeline for the invasion has been always sort of this decade, 2027, but Xi Jinping has made a lot of moves to ensure that even if he doesn't take it by peace, that his military is ready for it. Obviously, he probably prefers the option to not use his force, considering going to war with the United States, Japan is going to be very costly, but he's double preparing in that sense. Okay, next question here. Let's see. Question. From Leonard, when will you be going to China? I don't think I'll be ever going to China unless the CCP collapses, because I'll probably be arrested. And so there's actually a funny thing, meme going on in China. So if you're from the overseas and you return to China and you're like a trader kind of person, I believe the reward for reporting you is 500,000 yuan. I don't know how much that is in RMB. 500k yuan to US dollars. So $70,000 for reporting somebody like me in China. All right, next question from here. It says, hello everybody. From Why Wouldn't I? It says, big time viewer here. Thank you. Opinions on Chinese channels promoting Chinese culture. So here's the problem, right? Most of the Chinese channels, like even my favorite, like Chef Wang Gang, who recently was silenced for, offending the regime. Even he's technically like Chinese soft power, but some of the channels, like I think you guys probably seen it. I think her name is Li Ziqi. And there's another one, Feng Shi something, but they all do like rural side country living, right? They're cooking all these delicious meals. They're showing off the beautiful countryside. A lot of that it's actually pretty traditional relatively to what other stuff comes out of China today. But the thing is, like, when they're a smaller channel, they may be independent, but once they get a little bit of scale, they get brought out by like larger companies with ties to the government because they're so good at sort of directing people's perception of China. So my view is this, right? I think it doesn't hurt to watch it, but just do realize that that's not the representation of what 99% of China really is like, and that's just Chinese soft power. All right, next question. Again from Ling Ling. Low volume. Let me see if the volume is good or not. Hello? I think the volume is okay. I hope nothing's playing in the background. Okay, so another question from Ling Ling. Do you receive threats from CCP? No, I actually haven't received any threats yet. All right. Derek Pang says, when did you escape China and arrive here in the US? I grew up, so I left China when I was 11. And from Leoski here says, I have a family member who is a mathematician and a college professor. About 7 years ago, he introduced the family to his Chinese girlfriend. Now they're married. China honeypot operation. So obviously not every Chinese person in another country is a honeypot, but if you do see the case where they're actively approaching politicians, important, especially at the local level, right? Like city council people, mayoral candidates, even like township people, those are the ones that are pretty scary, especially if they're an attractive woman. All right. Where am I? I hope I didn't skip any questions. From Yan, Bredono says, when is the war against Taiwan? Do they talk about it on TV, newspaper? And what is the real position between Russia and Ukraine? All right, very, very big and very important question here. So the Taiwan invasion is technically set for this decade. It probably will happen before 2027 because Xi Jinping is getting very old. And also his third term technically ends in 2027. So for him within the Communist Party to continue gaining support in a way that would say, against all odds, you're still going to take Taiwan and you actually succeed. He has to give them a clear plan. And again, if this goes into the idea that if he doesn't do it in this decade, he has made extensive announcements to say that this is a mission for him to do, not to leave it for the next guy. So this is something he's going to do. So before 2027. Now, in terms of the CCP position on Ukraine and Russia, it has pivoted in a sense that we used to view it as the relationship between two countries, right? China and Russia. Now it's really a relationship of Xi Jinping and Putin. So both dictators, either one of them, if something happens to them, the relationship will collapse. This is not a pact made by the people of Russia and people of China against Ukraine. This is actually a pure power move in the sense that this is to build like if two people are on the same boat, you kind of have to keep going. If one of them dies or falls over, then the entire ship sinks, if that makes sense. All right, next question is, oh yeah, for the Ukraine part too, right? Like China still doesn't want to maintain or lose its image of neutrality. Same thing with Israel too. But deep down, we all know that they support Russia. From Zhang says, will you get arrested if you enter China? Yeah, probably I will be arrested. I was born in China. From Island says, you single? No, I'm not, unfortunately. All right. From PKF says, love your content, man. Do you think we will see China break again in our lifetime as their population crashes? I really think so. Like people always make fun of Gordon Chan saying how he wrote a book with, like the coming collapse of China in 2001 or something. If you actually read his book, a lot of the stuff he said in there, they're actually happening now. So I do think that in our lifetime, we're going to see China collapse in the sense of the Communist Party will fall, but I don't know if it will split up. I know a lot of people say that China somehow was split up, but I think we're in a world today where even though there's still clear senses of difference in ethnic and cultural boundaries, especially in China with 50 different ethnic groups, but I think the issue is the CCP has made it clear. And many people do think this way too, that they rather sort of stay as one group called China. We'll see though. You do have groups like in Tibet, in Xinjiang, where they do want to advocate for kind of splitting from China. We'll see how it goes. It's really up to the people. All right, before we do more questions, I got some other headlines for you guys. So let me just delete. Oh, by the way, so yesterday I made a video about this 14-year-old boy in a school who was suicided, and then YouTube decided that this was a video about self-harm, which clearly, if they had anybody watching it, they realized I was questioning that the entire reason I made the video was because people in China were protesting that this wasn't a suicide of a 14-year-old. This was rather a case of potential murder. So what I was showing on screen apparently was too much for YouTube. Like I only showed bruises and I think not even cuts, or maybe I think there's one picture with a cut. Anyways, the video got taken down. I had to re-upload it. Pretty sad about that, actually. I don't know why YouTube really thinks that somehow people are so sensitive that seeing pictures which are evidence of a potential murder is going to recall people into thinking that's self-harm. It's pretty ridiculous. But anyways, so a little bit of update on that, actually. Let's do... So this is... if you haven't watched the video, by the way, the actual video of go to my YouTube channel and watch it after this. So this is so students and their parents have been protesting, and they actually made it into the school, and they basically just smashed everything inside the principal's office because they're just so mad. Yesterday there were about 10,000 people out onto the street. They've been protesting this is the third, I guess you would say the second day, the 27th, 28th. Oh no, the third day now, 29th. And people are really angry. A lot of people think that they're ready to start. This is like where the revolution in China is happening. Yeah, so the 14-year-old, it's very tragic because he had been abused by his teacher. and then there's still no like clear conclusion as to what happened. And this took place on Christmas Eve too. So, anyways, watch that video if you haven't. All right, so let me delete these ones. Oh yeah, this is another funny headline too. So from Reuters, it says Xi Jinping urges Chinese envoys to create diplomatic iron army. All right, so diplomatic iron army. If you know what wolf warrior diplomacy is, this is like going back to that. But now Xi Jinping used a new term called diplomatic iron army. Basically, it's the exact same thing. Chinese diplomats, they're supposed to withstand, the embarrassment of news coming out of China and pretend like they're, the stone cold faced killers on the diplomatic stage. Sure, you don't call it wolf warrior diplomacy, but everything that this characteristics they're trying to portray is still the wolf warrior diplomacy. And Xi Jinping, take a look what he says here. He says, dare to be good at struggle and become defenders of the national interest. That's exactly what wolf warrior diplomacy is. And it says it is necessary to resolutely safeguard the interest of national sovereignty, security, and development with a posture of readiness and a firm will to defy strong powers. All right, so nothing changed basically. Chinese diplomats, foreign ministry spokesperson, the the Chinese ambassador to the U.S., anybody, they're still going to give you that same aggressive tone. And it's no wonder, like if you think about why foreign investors aren't going to China, they're just tired of people like the Chinese diplomats who are constantly threatening people and just twisting the reality, twisting logics around. It's super tiring for people. All right, so let's see here. Oh, by the way, so we still have a sale with my sponsorship, Blueberry Creative. The sale goes until January 3rd, and you have some of the great products here on sale. If you haven't checked out the Taiwan High Mountain Tea, so we got this tea directly from tea farmers in Taiwan, and it tastes super floral and sweet. So a lot of the green tea, especially, they have that bitter taste to begin with, right? Like some of the varieties of oolong. This Taiwan High Mountain Tea, you get the sweet brew for the first 5 to 6, I think, brews. In my experience, 4 to 5, 5 to 6, and then you start getting that traditional green tea bitter taste. So if you haven't checked it out, I'll leave the link in the description and in the comment. All right, let's do more questions here. Let me just post this up here. All right, questions. Close encounters. From Wuhan Institute of Virology says, which city province are you from? So I'm from Shandong province and the city of Zibo. It's where Confucius, well, technically where I was born, it's quite close to where Confucius was born. Like I think a 20-minute drive, and you can go visit his temple. Question from Martha Castillo. Do you receive hate or death threats from on your DMs because of your content? So the only hateful stuff that I get are from like Chinese usernames. They're just, it's like the most weirdest threats. They're like, oh, are you not tired? Or are you not, I don't even know what they say. Something basically about how I'm like going against my own people, and like, are you not afraid of your ancestors looking down on you and stuff like that? It's just like, it's like super, like if you're Chinese, you probably understand it. It's like, oh, your grandparents would be disappointed in you, or your ancestors would like not give you good karma, these sort of things. But other than that, no, people have been pretty nice to me. Oracle of Eden, it's been an eventful year, hasn't it? Oh yeah, it's super eventful. I'm actually kind of happy that this year we had so many things to kind of talk about and expose about the CCP. From Ian Hui, are you anti-Chinese government or anti-Chinese? Genuine question. So I am not anti-Chinese people. I think that's the central question people always ask, right? I'm not against like people in China. I don't hate the people in China. I'm not like some freak, right? But I am very critical, and I am anti-CCP because the Chinese Communist Party, as we've all witnessed, have done so many wrongs, not just against the Chinese people. Most of the time it is in China, but they've done so much harm around the world, right? Considering the virus, considering what they've done to steal technology from other countries, the malpractice in markets, right? They've used the leverage for cheap goods to essentially drive out competitions for domestic companies, and so that ruins the economy in other countries. Their cheap products aren't even well made, and it's like they're actually the ones who are misrepresenting China and the Chinese people. So they're really the ones who we should be critical of. The government, the party obviously controls the government and not the people. All right. Next question. Saw your short on Ghost Cities. Really interested. Was there a sudden boom for real estate development there? Real estate is a very interesting thing. So in China in the 1980s, prior to 1980s, there wasn't a real thing called private property, right? Everything was owned by the government. After 1980s, the government decided that we need to make some money, so they started selling. All the land in China is owned by the government, by the way. Local governments, provincial governments, the national government. And so what they do is developers would buy, or they call it leasing, but really you're spending money, you're buying the land for a certain amount of time to use for developments. And it was around this time that in Hong Kong, which this idea of, especially this was very prominent in the 80s and 90s, you could sort of bid for pre-sales for different projects, right, that were developing. So they took that and they started introducing it in the mainland. And of course, because people started getting rich around the same time, lots of foreign investments are coming in, people had money, they want to buy houses, right? And then so the developers started building bigger and bigger places. But because there's so many people in China, it was more beneficial and it was more profitable for them to build complexes after complexes instead of single-story houses. And so it's sort of like concurrently happened. You had more money, you had more developers who can buy more land from the government, and then the government was happy because they could sell more land. And then the downside to that was there were so many buildings now in China that nobody lives in them. They're like ghost cities, as you mentioned. There's not really a lot of incentives to buy anymore. Consumerism is down in an all-time low. And what really took place is just like a materialistic explosion in China in the last 40 years. And that's ended now. Next question. Again from Derek says, do you believe China will never surpass the US? To me, it seems they're very vulnerable. There's a lot of issues with China, fundamentally because they're not a market economy, for one. It's very hard for them to innovate, for them to surpass a free market. There's no idea of competition, right? So eventually what happens, and I think this is inevitable, is if China is always running as a government market or government-controlled market, when you're up against other countries who are built on a free market competition system, it eventually becomes a government-to-government competition. I think it's inevitable. Like we saw with the trade war. I think that was going to happen regardless whether that was Trump or not, because now Biden is doing that too. All right. Let's see. Is there any other news before? I think I covered all of the news. So let me just go back to more questions here. All right. From Jetlag Productions Singer, how do you get your information? If it's been asked already, I apologize. Great question, Jetlag. So I get all my information from the internet, from people that I know in China, from talking to my friends, other experts who are more knowledgeable than I am. I have this like chat group that we share a lot of information in, watching stuff, reading about stuff. So it depends. But for headlines like this, I just read a lot of news websites, and a lot of them is in Chinese, and I really have to pay attention to the like Chinese Douyin, or like basically TikTok, but like China Douyin, what's happening on Weibo, what's happening on a lot of the sort of like Quora like stuff, like forums, like Reddit, but like in Chinese, all of these things. Basically, it really depends, but most of the hot topics make it onto Twitter, so it's good to have a Twitter account. All right, from Chris again, I have a friend I have a friend in Xi'an, China. I said one day I would visit him. I know nothing about the city. Do you know anything about it? Also, is there a risk for an American like myself to visit? If you're going to visit China, I don't think, like, unless you're doing something unlawful, you won't be arrested or anything like that. You can still visit China. It's just that you'll encounter a lot of, I think, different. Everybody's going to have a different experience. Xi'an is a really great city. It's an old city. In fact, it's like one of my favorite food cities. Xi'an is great, but the issue is you have to consider if you feel like it's worth the trip, because if you know, for example, if you're just making it like a week full or like 2 weeks in China, that's fine. But if you're staying there for maybe like a month or something, make sure you carry a separate cell phone. Make sure you're not, you know, doing any sort of sensitive stuff while you're in China. Make sure you get like a good VPN. Make sure you have, you know, all your files and documents and all these things prepared, all that. But yeah, no, like for an average person, it's fine to visit China. But I don't think you should go right now because you know, you never know what's going to happen, right? So, anyways, I can't really say you shouldn't go, but I also say that be careful when you go. All right. From Johnny D, am I the few that realizes that most of the junk on Amazon is mostly cheap items from China? Wife bought me new off-brand sneakers and things for my car. Look like cheap Chinese goods. Yeah, most of the stuff on Amazon is actually just from Chinese brands. One of the exceptions I think that people should still consider is Anchor. Anchor stuff are actually really good. They're also from China, but they're like more higher. They're higher qualities, and in fact, I think a lot of the other brands are knockoffs of Anchor products. So it's rare to find something like that. But you know, if you're talking about stuff like the cosmetics, a lot of them may be knockoffs from China. Shoes. I think the stuff that I bought for, like, I have a shower head. It's from China, but it's great. It's like super, like the pressure is great. I don't know. It depends. I'm not saying you shouldn't buy from Amazon, but yeah, like some of the stuff is pretty bad. So just read the reviews. But then again, a lot of reviews are bad too. From Alice Noble, how's the COVID pneumonia cases in China now start increasing? That's the issue, Alice, is they really shut down all the information on it. So you can't get much more details, but I know it was really bad. It's probably still pretty bad. All right, from John Baron are the mysterious death ramping up again? So yeah, same thing with what Alice just asked. I don't have too much to provide right now, other than one interesting fact is a lot of like pro CCP celebrities, like these public figures, they're dying and the interesting part is this, right? They're all dying like in a very similar way. So there was let me show you this, right? So there's Kathy Chow, who is this? I believe there's also and I did a lot of this video too, right? So if you want to go back, you can watch it. SenseTime founder. Okay, so this guy, he's the founder of SenseTime, which makes China's AI surveillance, like the facial recognition stuff. He died, like he basically died suddenly, and then how they described it was he died on, or like they couldn't get him the medical treatments needed. It's a very like a general description of what happened to them, right? And then this actress named Kathy Chow, she also was like on the way to the hospital. They couldn't treat her properly, so that she passed away. Later on, it was found that she died from a sudden cardiac arrest. Now so you might not believe this, but I'm telling you, like these people that did the bidding of the CCP, they're actually getting punished by the very like lies that they're trying to cover up, which is super insane if you consider that. Like, you spoke on behalf of the CCP, you lied for them about the virus, and she was actually an ambassador for the Chinese vaccines, even though she had an autoimmune disease. It's very tragic, but again, I mean, the reality is that these people, and there's many more. I can't remember on top of my head, but yeah, it's pretty scary. So famous celebrities are dying, and we might see more and more. So it's pretty crazy. Yeah, but that's all I know from the virus right now. Do, 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 do. All right. So, from Ben says Ben Lila says, do you think Chinese influence in Southeast Asia will wane? I don't think for a while it will, because a lot of the southeastern countries, I think they're still on the edge in terms of who to go to, like U.S. or China, right? Countries like Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, I think Thailand as well. Vietnam is a really important indicator to watch, because who ultimately Vietnam chooses to side with in terms of trade, potentially the military, is going to dictate, I think, what will follow suit, right? The Philippines, however, I think they had a fundamental turn away from China recently, given just the fact that there's so many aggressive maneuvers by the Chinese coastal guards and navy, and that they're really threatening the Philippines and their livelihood. And so I think it really takes, like, this is what happens, right? Every country thinks that China is good until they get smashed in the head by like the communist iron fist, like just punches right in the face for them, right? Things, it could be very different. It could be like a trade war. It could be the virus. It could be like an aggression in like the fishing zone or whatnot. Every country has to experience this, but once they do, I think they have a fundamental difference. Like for India, the border clash was huge. It generated a national change of perception for China. I think a lot of people did with the virus as well. Okay, question from Boomer Matheson. How does an American start communicating with regular citizens in China? Well, you can do so by visiting Chinese websites and trying to get an account. It's very hard because usually you have to live in China. You have to have a social security code. But I guess I could say the one thing is you can go out and you can actually talk with your local community if they're Chinese, and start kind of having conversations with them about their perception of the Chinese government, and just kind of learning from that. Many of them are still kind of in the circle as if they had never left China. They use like Chinese communication apps and so on. You can try to talk with them, but it's very hard. First name, last name says, so you're from the state of confusion. Yeah, I am. Paradigm Custom Scale says, is there an opportunity for neighboring countries of China that are on good terms with the U.S. to facilitate better trade opportunities with, like Vietnam? Yes, so that what I just said before, it's very important, because the more the U.S. can approach these countries with incentives, the less they need to rely on China. And because here's the reality, right? This might sound really bad, but most countries, they don't care enough about what happens between China and the U.S. as long as there's enough money to be made, as long as they're kept out of it, right? There's very few countries, I can say this bluntly, that really cares about ideology when it comes to this whole freedom versus communism. This was what happened during World War II, the Cold War. It's always one or two countries that lead the coalition, but there's always so many bystanders, right? You saw with World War II, it was Britain, America, right? To some degrees, the resistance fighters in Europe against Nazi Germany, against Japan, and of course those countries that are being invaded too. But with the Cold War as well, you see that it's really the U.S. and Russia, or Soviet Union back then. Now with the new Cold War, is China and the U.S. So now the United States maybe has like one or two countries they can really rely on when the time comes, when crap hits the fan, right? The U.S. is Japan, has the U.K. I would say there's, South Korea is coming on board. Taiwan, obviously, because it's going to get invaded if it doesn't prepare. But the Philippines is coming around. But other countries, like, they're still on the fence. Not many of these truly want to, lose their national power level just because they want to involve themselves in a war. It's very rare, right? I don't even think Canada is going to do much. Most countries are like this. Like, just look at how much they've contributed to any conflict that the United States has been involved in the past 3-4 decades. It's usually that's just how it is. Um, the Killer 5461. I'm in China right now. Should I be watching this? Maybe you shouldn't be watching this, but if you're on a VPN, maybe it's okay. Um, One thing that always struck with me, this is from Alex Ducharme, is about COVID was Wuhan itself. What is it like now? Wuhan is, I think, normal now. I don't think you have much difference. From Matix676, you skipping my question whether you're afraid of Chinese government because they can see you as danger, or talking about China publishing whistleblowers makes me concerned. Sorry, I skipped it. No, I'm not afraid of the Chinese government. Talking about China publishing whistleblowers makes me concerned. I'm not so sure what you mean by that. Because they can see you as a danger. Yeah, so like I said, I already answered this question, but I live in the U.S. I think I'm protected by law here. There's no CCP agent that's going to come and harm me. The L says, how safe would you rate the street food in China be, like at a reputable district and area? So if you are in China, you want to try street food, don't go to like popular restaurants and stuff like that. Go to these like street stalls. But the disclaimer here is you're probably going to get diarrhea once or twice and food poisoning. If you're lucky, you might hit up some of them. I don't know what it is. I don't think it's even like the food safety or the food handling safety standards. I think it's just the material that they use, the food ingredients. I think something's wrong with that. Question from Yan Berdono. I'm not a Taiwan specialist. Was Taiwan ever Chinese? Why did China say Taiwan belongs to them? The if you consider just the physical island, it's a very complicated history because there's so many like different countries that's taken it over, colonized it. But the people in Taiwan, like the people we know now as the majority of the people in Taiwan, they were all Chinese to begin with because they came from China, mainland China, after they lost the civil war with the CCP. So the KMT took a bunch of people to Taiwan. Now, obviously, there's still indigenous people on the island of Taiwan before, but that's, I'm talking more like the so-called Han Taiwanese. Those are Chinese people in a sense that their roots are Chinese. But the problem is now Taiwan has for so many years created their unique identity. I don't think many people in Taiwan, especially the younger generation, even see themselves as Chinese. I think Taiwanese is an actual identity. You have a unique sort of culture. You have different ways of speaking Chinese. You have your local dialects. You're very in tune with the Western world. So you're a very branched out, right? So I wouldn't say that they're full Chinese now, but their ancestry, their roots are still Chinese. Sir God says, what will your wife say about you stating, unfortunately, I am married? I didn't say unfortunately, I just said I am married. Oh, I did say unfortunately, but I mean like, I think I meant it in the sense that like, no, sorry, I'm not single. This is, my wife is actually sleeping right now, so I hope she doesn't hear this. From Paradigm Custom Scales, this may be the most underrated channel keeping real time information flowing. Thank you very much to those who are willing to hear it. Keep up the good work. Excellent content as always. Happy New Year. Thank you very much. Are you going to, from Roman Fat Cat, are you going to talk about Chinese influence in American political parties? I think I have in the past, but the issue is I don't really, at this point, I think we have a general trend, even among Democrats and Republicans, there's a general sense of, I guess you'd say, consensus that China is the number one adversary. Obviously, there's still influence, but I think that as long as the bigger scope of things, because you can't really get, concrete evidence to suggest. I'm sure, 80-90% of Congress, they've taken bribes from Chinese agents before. But I think this point, what matters a lot is that the U.S. as a whole is not infiltrated to a degree that, they're being closer to China. Dog Tire says, any news about the labor of Chinese children? I think this is always going to be a problem. From Kevin Taylor, hi David, how much information and news does the average Chinese citizen get or could possibly access from the rest of the world? And secondly, in your opinion, where do you see Hong Kong in 5 years? So I'll answer the second part first for Hong Kong. I think it's only going to get really bad because now Hong Kong is basically a Chinese city. It no longer is a free market part of China, the shining jewel of Asia. It is going to get, it's basically going to be like any other large cities in China. And that trend's going to keep going down. And for the first part, how much news does an average citizen in China get? So this really depends. If you're somebody who has access to VPN, you can read a lot about the outside world, but relatively to like what we consider is information and news, technically like people in China still get information. They're just not getting the right information. So if you want to judge it by our standard, I would say like 5%. But if you're judging by their standards, they'll say that they're getting 100% of the news, just not the kind of news that we know as news. From Matix676 again says, I used to talk for a bit with a student from China that came to Poland to study, and he sounded like he was afraid to talk about Chinese government critically. Do you think there was a point in trying to make him think more critically, or is it always a lost cause? I don't know how long ago this was, because if you had done what you just said like 10 years ago, people might still be very reluctant to criticize the government. But today is different. A lot of the newly like immigrants from China that come out, they're all openly criticizing Xi Jinping, just because it's so bad now. But I think obviously the fear to really do something is still there. But you're seeing daily protests in China. This is something that hasn't taken place for a very long time. Massive amounts of protest. I think in terms of whether was it a lost cause, I don't think so. I think it really depends on the people, right? Some of them they're just so deep in that CCP mindset that it's hard to drag them out. But other people, they're still kind of rational. They're willing to listen. John Baran says, David, do you ever catch the China show on YouTube? A couple guys lived in China for 10 years. Yes. So the China show is obviously super important, and they've been like the frontier of China videos on YouTube. I watched them before, but now I don't really watch a lot of YouTube because I'm always reading about stuff or researching. But yeah, super cool what they're doing, and they're doing great in my view. Like, I think the difference is, I think they do a lot from their own experience on Chinese society, in a sense that really revealing what was like living in China compared to what's being portrayed by the Chinese government. For me, I do more like political stuff. Marvin Cardenas says, don't you're worried about them to shut you down? No, I'm not. I feel safe. Kelly Burnett, unfortunately for the rest of us ladies, thank you. Make sure your wife won't watch this later. You're in big trouble. I think she's taking a nap, so maybe she didn't hear me. She didn't hear me well. All right. James Pyre says, why do you hate CCP? I hate the CCP because I think they're just doing so many wrong things. And it really, from the more I learn about communism, the more I learn about the CCP, it's not even anger that's really what's driving me. It's sadness. It's the fact that there is still something like this in the world today. And I think my mission is to kind of expose to what people have not been told for the last 60, 70 years. From Crotty says, hey, I checked a few things from the stories that you've done, and some of them are now false. Have you thought about correcting those things? Just negative things seems quite unlikely. Let me know which ones. I'd love to know. I'm not so sure which ones you're referring to. Boomer Matheson says, are there any free world radio stations broadcasting into China for civilian use? Yes, there is. There's one called The Sound of Hope. It's a shortwave radio, so all you need is a shortwave radio to listen to it. They broadcast 24 hours. And the way that it's really cool, actually. I've done a video on this. They use this new technology that they developed, which is to delocalize the radio towers that they've set up all around the world and around China. And so anytime the CCP tries to do a signal interference, it will shift the signal. And so the person in China, as long as you can like slightly adjust your shortwave radio, you'll still be able to hear them, and it's never been shut down by the CCP. It's called Sound of Hope. Maddox says he got to know me from a night get coming. That's interesting. Thank you. Roman Fat Cat, are you willing to do interviews with other news reporters? Yeah, I've done interviews for Newsmax, for NTD. I've done them for, I think, this like Turkish state media, actually. The Crazy Maisie says, really love your news reporting style, but I'm always wondering if you ever had PR problem with Chinese government. I don't think I'm like that noticed enough for them to be like, oh, this guy deserves to be publicly condemned by a Chinese state propaganda machine. No, so I haven't really, no. From the L says, hey David, is my first ever streaming watching you. After knowing you've seen the China show, do you ever plan on doing collaboration with them? I think it'd be a great idea. Maybe if they reach out. I don't have anything on the agenda. They're probably pretty busy. I mean, I'm doing my thing, they're doing their things. So when the opportunity comes, I'm sure we'll do something. Mohammed Irshan says, are you going to make more videos on tofu dreg projects? I will, but the issue is tofu dreg has been in China for so long that it really have to be something new that comes out, because I was using information from like 10 years ago. But this is still persistent in China. The tofu dreg stuff is still happening. From Dog Tired says, do you think replacing Xi Jinping would create a good change for China? So that's a really, really important question. I'm glad you asked it, Doge Tired, sorry. The reason is this. So many people think that, oh, you're just critical of Xi Jinping, or that maybe when Xi Jinping dies or something happens to him, that China will change, right? The reality is that it has to be the CCP that's destroyed or collapses. Simply because Xi Jinping can, go away, but in 10 years, you'll have another guy who might be worse than Xi Jinping. You never know. It's the system, the Communist Party, that's created the environment in which people like Xi Jinping can come into power. Because the entire issue with the Communist Party is that it chooses its leadership through power struggles, right? Xi Jinping is a product of power struggle. He's not a product of some extraordinary ability. He was chosen because it looked like he didn't have a faction belonging to them. That he was just a loyal servant. So people thought he can be controlled. It turns out he had this broad ambition to dominate the world, whatnot. So without him or replacing him isn't the issue here. The fundamental issue is the CCP itself. So you asked a really important question. From Thomas says, what was the connection between Xi's father and Mao? So Mao purged Xi Jinping's father because Xi's father was involved in this case where he was branded as a sympathizer for another guy, but he was branded as an anti-party. He was forced to self-criticize in front of people. He was put into a public struggle session. So Mao Zedong, this was 1 year before he launched the Cultural Revolution. Now, so Xi Jinping's father was a victim of the Cultural Revolution, or the precondition to the Cultural Revolution. And so technically you think that Xi Jinping would hate Mao Zedong, right? But no, because now Xi Jinping needs the Mao factor to stabilize his power and to really carry out his idea of, putting China backwards into that Mao era like condition that he's embracing Mao Zedong, even though Mao Zedong almost killed his dad. Karate says, well, one I noticed was the video game casino thing. The legislation, in my opinion, is very progressive. The 80 billion loss is speculative value, which really means nothing. Well, I don't think the legislative one is very progressive in the sense that you think it is. So you have to ask the question, right, Karate, why are they doing this now? It's in China, nothing's ever done just because it's for the pure intent of the goodwill for, trying to get gamers to stop spending money in China. It's the idea because China's so out of money, the amount of spending that they're getting now, there's no consumerism in China. The amount of spending they're getting now, they have to control where that's being spent on or how that's being spent on. So if gamers, they're not spending it on a new car, but they're dropping like $30,000 on a video game. That's not how the CCP wants you to spend money. They want you to spend that $30 into the real physical economy so that it can have the money to regenerate the economy, because China's in deflation right now. Now, for regards to that 80 billion lost speculative value, yeah, obviously that stock market fluctuates, right? You can lose, 80 billions in values today, but the next day you gain the points back, obviously. So that point is because that single day drop was worth about $80 billion in terms of value because of the shocking political news that came out regarding video games. Hopefully that answered your question. Roman Fat Cat, is there something you're investigating that you have yet to speak about or not yet ready to report on? I think I've covered many areas. Mostly now it's just up-to-date information, like stuff that's coming out of China, like, social events, political changes, and all that. But I am working on a special report about Taiwan. I'm in the process of editing it, so it will be out hopefully early days of January. Matix says, do you think that Putin and Russia, it is the same? Like, it doesn't matter if your main villain dies as long as the toxic idea lives on. I think Russia is actually a little bit different because it doesn't technically have that communist factor left. But I would say it's like 90% similar. Because right now, the relationship between Putin and Xi Jinping is that they're on the same boat. They're both facing an issue of power and legitimacy issues, I think. So either of them dies or the other one faces some trouble, removed from power or whatnot, I think you'll see the China-Russia relationship collapse too. John Byrne says, David, how do you feel about Kissinger's death? I'm like super happy, actually. I think a lot of the issues we're facing today when it comes to China was created by Kissinger. I think even Nixon later was regretting the fact that they engaged with communist China, but Kissinger was just full on. Like, Kissinger is the worst foreign policy person to ever exist in the world stage. And I think a lot of the stuff that happened in the last 40 years is because of Kissinger. So he didn't have a lot of influence after he retired, but still, I think there's just the stuff that he's done. They're really evil, in my view. It's been a long time since I've seen a country go into deflation. Yeah, crazy Maisie. It's crazy. Japan, it took them so long to get out of it. I think they're still struggling, and China's just got into it. Crowley says, I don't really get that. Wouldn't buying whatever means taxes if Tencent and whatever are controlled by CCP, so the tax is technically 100%? Personally, I think it's because they want scientists, not gamers. No, because, so the thing is this, right? If your economy depends on things like you buying a house. So the Chinese economy is largely depending on things like real estate, depending on things like selling technology. If you're doing this, so you're a gamer, right? You have $30,000. If you don't spend that on things like food, on clothing, on a car, you're not really helping to contribute to the broader economy. Those companies that make the game, they're not really adding so much value in terms of, I don't know how to explain it that would make sense in terms of, like, for example, if you spend $30,000 on a company that makes semiconductors, or if you're buying that, or if you're spending on a house, like a down payment, right? That directly it's a faster reflection in the local economy. It's a faster reflection in the banking system, in the general economy than it is for a gaming company. Because at the end of the day, there's the gaming company is a private sector, and it takes a longer time for that to be reflected. And I think that's simply because China is in such a dire need for money right now. They don't really have a lot of choices, so they don't want you to spend it on things that don't matter. So when you said it's because they want scientists, not gamers, it is a valid point, and I think I mentioned this in the video as well. They want gaming companies to take a backseat to other industries like high-tech companies, semiconductor, military technology, things like that. So you're right in that respect. Dog Tire, does the Chinese community still practice to only have one son or daughter strictly despite decrease of their population. So China wants 3 kids per family now, but nobody's having babies because they can't afford to have babies. So that's a struggle too. How long can, from John Brown, how long can China and CCP survive with foreign investment? I think you mean without foreign investments. I think maybe a few years at most. The L says, what are your thoughts on the 2008 milk powder scandal? I heard the company survived the scandal and even grew larger. There must be some corruption, bribery at play. Yeah, so all these companies, ultimately they become a political question rather than a moral or social question. And once it becomes a political question, it really just gets swallowed into like shut down public opinion, censor all the information, and in a few years nobody cares about it anymore. Okay, last question. Oracle of Eden. David, are you aware that China may be staring down mass starvation because their banking sector and agriculture sectors are joined at the hip? I think the issue is real. It's a concern, but I don't know if it's going to happen soon because there's China still has some food, but their banking sector is going to collapse faster, I think, than agriculture, because the banking sector is so heavily tied to the real estate, and the real estate is the one that's going to go out first. But food, I think, it's very possible we'll see that again, but I don't think that they're willing to see that. So there's still some storage of food in China. All right. That will be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for participating and staying and chatting with me. I hope I answer all your questions. If you haven't, you can leave them in the comments, and I'll try to reply to them after. And we'll be going off the grid and until after the New Year's. So I guess I will say that I'll see you next year. And I hope you guys enjoy the content. Make sure to subscribe to our channel if you're new, and as well as check out my other videos. And link will be just click into the channel and you'll see all the ones that I've talked about. All right. Until next time. Bye-bye.